Every family has its secrets, hidden deep under the laughter, shared meals, and holidays spent together. These secrets stay hidden until they become too heavy to keep. My uncle, Uncle Tom, was the center of our family gatherings. He was the one who came in with a loud laugh that filled the whole room, always carrying gifts that he carefully picked out to make everyone happy, from the youngest kid to the oldest grandparent. He was great at telling stories, making even the most serious person smile. To us, he was more than just an uncle, he was a source of joy, the embodiment of everything warm and inviting about family. I used to marvel at his ability to light up a room, to make any space feel alive and buzzing with his presence. He seemed larger than life, his charisma infectious, his charm disarming. It was easy to look up to him, to feel safe in his company, to see him as the glue that held our family together. But beneath those big smiles and hearty laughs lay a different man, a man I had no idea existed until it was too late. The same man whose laughter once made me feel at ease would later leave me trembling with unease. It's strange how you can know someone all your life and yet not know them at all. What I discovered about Uncle Tom didn't just shatter the image I had of him, it shattered a part of me, too. A part that had always believed in the safety of family, in the trust that should come with love and kinship. If only I had known back then that some secrets are not meant to stay buried, and some masks, no matter how convincingly worn, can't hide the darkness lurking underneath forever. I was 18 when my world turned upside down, a year that should have been filled with dreams of a bright future, yet it became the year that changed everything. I lived with my parents in a small, cozy house nestled on the outskirts of town. It was the kind of place where life felt simple and predictable, where the nights were as silent as the grave and the darkness stretched endlessly across the fields. Our little house always felt like a safe haven to me, a warm cocoon away from the chaos of the outside world. Uncle Tom, my dad's younger brother, lived close by, just a short drive down the road. He was family, and in our community, family meant everything. It wasn't unusual for him to drop by unannounced, his presence so familiar that no one ever questioned it. He would arrive with his trademark grin, carrying a bag of fruits or snacks, and make himself comfortable as though he belonged there. To us, he did. As a child, I had always looked up to him. He was the fun uncle, the one who played games with me when I was little, bought me small gifts when he visited, and never seemed to run out of jokes or stories to tell. Over the years, his affection never wavered, though sometimes it felt different. His hugs lingered a little longer than they should have. His compliments, though seemingly harmless, occasionally made me feel self-conscious. He called me names like princess and darling, words that sounded sweet on the surface but left a strange feeling in my chest. But I never said anything about it. After all, he was Uncle Tom. He was family, and families are supposed to love each other. I told myself he was just being kind, just showing love in his own way. Even when I sometimes felt a pang of discomfort, I brushed it aside, convincing myself I was overthinking things. Why would I question someone who had always been there, someone who had never given anyone else a reason to doubt him? Uncle Tom, a harmless man with a big heart, than to face the possibility that there was something more beneath his affectionate gestures. At 18, I had no idea that the life I thought I understood, the family I believed in, could crumble in an instant. The night everything changed started off like any other humid summer night. The air was heavy, thick with a stickiness that clung to my skin, and the persistent chorus of crickets echoed through the stillness outside. It was the kind of night where the heat seemed to wrap around you like a suffocating blanket, making even the simplest task of falling asleep feel impossible. I tossed and turned in my small, dimly lit room, the ceiling fan doing little more than moving the warm air around. The quietness of the house only amplified my restless thoughts. My mind wouldn't stop racing. I had so much on my plate, my future looming ahead, the excitement and fear of leaving for college, and the uncertainty of what awaited me beyond the familiar walls of our little home. It felt like everything was changing too fast, and I was caught somewhere in the middle, trying to hold on to the life I knew while preparing for the unknown. The silence in my room seemed to magnify the noise in my head, each thought colliding with the next until it was all too much. I lay on my bed, staring up at the dark ceiling, searching for some way to ease the restless energy building inside me. The heat pressed down on me, and I shifted uncomfortably, trying to find relief. Almost without thinking, I let my hands wander over my arms, my stomach, anything to distract myself from the oppressive warmth and the chaos of my mind. It wasn't about anything sensual or intentional, it was just an instinct, a desperate attempt to focus on something physical, something tangible, instead of the endless swirl of emotions and anxieties. But even that small act didn't bring the comfort I was hoping for. The night felt endless, the air suffocating, and my thoughts refused to quiet down. Little did I know, as I lay there searching for peace in the silence of my room, that the peace I had known all my life was about to be shattered in ways I could never have imagined. Suddenly, my door creaked open. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. It was Uncle Tom. I didn't have time to react before he was beside my bed, his presence filling the room with an uncomfortable weight. "What are you doing in the dark, sweetheart?" His voice was a whisper, but it carried a tone that made my skin crawl. I couldn't sleep, I stammered, pulling my sheets up to cover myself. He didn't leave. Instead, he stood there in the doorway, his shadow stretching across my room like a dark, unwelcome presence. His eyes locked on me, unblinking, scanning me from head to toe. It wasn't just a glance, it was a look that seemed to pierce through me, stripping away the safety I had always felt in my own space. The air grew heavy, and an icy chill ran down my spine despite the oppressive summer heat. For the first time, I felt truly exposed, like my room, my sanctuary, had been invaded by something I didn't know how to fight. Before I could say a word, before I could even process what was happening, he moved. Without warning, he crossed the room in a few quick strides and scooped me up into his arms. His sudden action left me paralyzed. My body refused to react, no scream, no struggle, just shock freezing me in place. I felt the strength of his arms around me, his grip firm and unyielding, as though he was afraid I might vanish if he loosened his hold even for a second. He carried me out of my room, his arms strong and deliberate, as though he had planned this moment 1,000 times in his mind. The hallway, once a comforting passage lined with family photos and memories, now stretched before me like an endless, foreboding tunnel. The soft glow of the nightlight on the wall cast eerie shadows, warping the familiar into something sinister. Each step he took reverberated through the house, the sound of his footsteps echoing in my ears like the toll of a warning bell. I wanted to scream, to fight, to do anything that could break this terrifying silence, but fear had stolen my voice. It sat heavy in my throat, suffocating me, reducing my thoughts to a chaotic whirlwind of disbelief and dread. My arms hung limply at my sides, my body betraying me as though it too had surrendered to the weight of the moment. How did it come to this? I wondered, my mind racing with questions I didn't know how to answer. His grip on me was unyielding, firm without being painful, but it carried an unsettling message: I wasn't in control. His fingers pressed into my skin, not harshly, but with a kind of desperation, as if he was afraid I would disappear if he let go. My heart thundered in my chest, each beat a frantic reminder of my helplessness. I felt exposed, vulnerable in a way I had never experienced before, and the realization was as chilling as the night air brushing against my skin. The kitchen door loomed closer, its frame dimly lit by the flickering fluorescent light above. The room beyond, a space I had always associated with warmth and safety, now felt like the entrance to something unknown and menacing. My stomach churned with unease as we crossed the threshold, the familiar scents of the house, cooking spices, wood polish, fading into the background. In their place was an oppressive tension, so thick it seemed to hang in the air like a storm cloud waiting to burst. Every nerve in my body screamed at me to do something, anything, to stop this. But the fear that gripped me was paralyzing, and I found myself frozen in his arms, my thoughts spiraling into dark corners I had never dared to explore before. The walls around us seemed to close in, the once cozy house transformed into a space where the lines of trust and safety had been obliterated. As he stepped into the kitchen, I realized that whatever was about to unfold would forever change how I saw him, how I saw this house, how I saw myself. My world had already begun to crack, and with each passing second, those cracks deepened, threatening to shatter everything I had ever believed in. Once we reached the kitchen, he carried me straight to the fridge, lifting me with an unsettling ease. He set me down on top of it like I weighed nothing, placing me far above the ground in a position that felt unnatural and strange. The height made me feel small, almost childlike, as if I were being put on display. Perched there, I couldn't help but feel exposed, isolated, and vulnerable, as though I had been removed from the safety of everything familiar and placed into an unfamiliar, dangerous territory. The kitchen, usually a warm space filled with the smells of cooking and the sounds of family chatter, felt eerily cold and foreign. The fluorescent light above buzzed faintly, flickering now and then, casting unsteady, distorted shadows across the walls. When the light flickered, his face seemed to shift, the shadows distorting his features into something unfamiliar, something that made my stomach twist. He stood there for a moment, staring up at me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. The silence between us stretched unbearably, broken only by the faint hum of the refrigerator beneath me. Then he spoke, his voice low and strained, a mixture of command and plea. "Do me a favor," he said, his tone carrying an unsettling weight. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it might burst out of my chest. My instincts screamed at me to run, to do something, but my body refused to obey. I was frozen, paralyzed by fear and the sheer disbelief of what was happening. My mouth was dry, and it took everything in me to force out a response. "What favor, Uncle Tom?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper, trembling as I spoke. Instead of answering right away, he stepped closer, his movements deliberate and slow, like a predator cornering its prey. He rested his hands on either side of me, gripping the edges of the fridge. His arms created a barrier, trapping me, leaving me no way to escape. I felt caged, as though I had been ensnared in a trap I hadn't even realized was being set. "You know I've always loved you," he began, his eyes locking onto mine with a look that made my stomach churn. His voice was calm but carried an undertone of something darker. "More than just as my niece. I need you to understand that." His words hit me like a slap, each one sinking in slowly but painfully. The room seemed to close in around me, the flickering light casting jagged shadows on the walls, amplifying my fear. This wasn't the man I thought I knew. His confession twisted my perception of him into something I didn't recognize, something I didn't want to face. My breath quickened, and I could feel the cold surface of the fridge beneath me, grounding me even as everything inside me screamed that this wasn't real, that this couldn't be happening. I don't feel that way, Uncle Tom," I stammered, my voice trembling as the weight of the moment pressed down on me. My hands gripped the edges of the fridge, desperate for some kind of anchor in the storm of emotions swirling around me. "Please, let's talk about this later," I pleaded, hoping that delaying the conversation might somehow diffuse the situation or give me time to figure out what to do. But he didn't seem to hear me. Or perhaps he didn't want to. His eyes bore into mine, intense and unrelenting, brimming with a mixture of desire and something far darker, something I couldn't name but that filled me with a deep, instinctive dread. "You've been avoiding this conversation," he said, his voice low but firm, tinged with frustration. "Avoiding me. But now, here, we have no choice." His words felt like chains binding me in place, leaving me helpless and trapped. The jovial, kind uncle I had known all my life was gone, replaced by someone I couldn't recognize, a man whose love had been twisted into something unthinkable, something I could never comprehend. The transformation was chilling, like watching a mask slip to reveal a stranger lurking beneath. That night, I learned a cruel truth about the masks people wear, the hidden facets of those we think we know. Uncle Tom had always been the loving, affectionate uncle, the one who brought joy and laughter to family gatherings. But now, that image was shattered, replaced by a version of him I wished I'd never seen. He didn't touch me physically that night, but the violation wasn't limited to physical boundaries. The emotional coercion, the manipulation, and the way he twisted his feelings into words that pierced through me, it all left scars that couldn't be seen but were just as painful. He began to talk, his voice calm yet filled with an unsettling intensity. It was as though he needed me to hear him, to understand his side of a story I didn't want to be part of. He poured out his feelings, unfiltered and raw, speaking of his confusion, his pain, and his loneliness. His words came fast and heavy, each one landing like a stone thrown at my heart. He spoke about how he'd loved me for years, how he'd watched me grow up, and how those feelings had evolved into something he claimed he couldn't control. "I've loved you since you were young," he said, his voice breaking as though he expected sympathy. "You're the only one who really understands me. I thought. I thought you might feel the same way. I sat there on the fridge, my heart pounding, my mind racing with a whirlwind of emotions, fear, anger, disbelief, and a crushing sense of betrayal. The fluorescent light above flickered again, casting shadows that danced across the walls, amplifying the surreal and suffocating atmosphere. Every word he spoke felt like a violation, like he was trying to rewrite the narrative of my life into something I couldn't recognize or accept. I wanted to scream, to run, to do anything to escape, but I couldn't move. His words had pinned me there, holding me hostage in a moment I couldn't believe was real. And yet, I listened, my silence born not of agreement but of fear and shock. Each sentence he uttered dug deeper into me, leaving wounds that I knew would take years to heal. His loneliness, his twisted perception of love, his belief that I could somehow reciprocate his feelings, all of it was wrong, but in his mind, it seemed justified. It was as though he had built a world where this could make sense to him, and he was dragging me into it against my will. When his words finally stopped, the silence was deafening. It pressed against me, heavy and suffocating, as I struggled to process everything I had just heard. I wanted to tell him how wrong he was, how sick and twisted his feelings were, but my voice refused to come. All I could do was sit there, numb and paralyzed, as he stood before me, waiting for a response I could never give. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? My mind was a whirlwind of emotions, fear, anger, confusion, and heartbreak. I sat in my room, the darkness around me feeling heavier than it ever had before. Every moment with Uncle Tom replayed in my head like a broken record. Every look he had given me, every touch I had once thought was harmless, every smile that seemed so genuine, it all felt tainted now. What I had once dismissed as affection or playfulness now carried a sinister weight that made my stomach churn. I hugged my knees to my chest, trying to find some semblance of comfort, but there was none to be found. The walls of my room, once my sanctuary, now felt like they were closing in on me. The shadows seemed to stretch longer, darker, as if they, too, were aware of the truth that had come to light. The oppressive silence of the night amplified my thoughts, each one louder and more unbearable than the last. The hours dragged on, each second feeling like an eternity. I kept asking myself the same questions over and over. How could this happen? Why didn't I see it before? Was there something I did wrong? The weight of it all sat heavy on my chest, making it hard to breathe. I felt trapped, not just in my room but in a reality I didn't know how to escape. When the first rays of morning light began to creep through my curtains, I felt no relief. The warmth of the sun, which usually brought comfort and a sense of renewal, did nothing to ease the ache in my heart. Instead, it illuminated the stark reality of what had happened. The light didn't chase away the darkness, it simply revealed it more clearly. I knew I couldn't keep this to myself. I couldn't carry this burden alone. The thought of confronting Uncle Tom again sent a chill down my spine, but I also knew that pretending nothing had happened wasn't an option. I had to speak to someone who could help me, who could guide me through this. Maybe it was a family member, maybe a teacher, or maybe even someone outside my immediate circle. I didn't know who yet, but I knew I couldn't stay silent. And then there was the question of whether I could even stay here. The house that had always been my home now felt like a prison, the walls tainted with memories I could no longer bear to revisit. The idea of leaving this place behind, of starting fresh somewhere far away from him, began to take root in my mind. It felt like the only way I could ever breathe freely again. But even that thought brought its own kind of fear. Leaving meant stepping into the unknown, a world where I didn't know what awaited me.